Hi everyone, my name is Cyrus Jansen. I'm an American expat for the past 13 years, 10 of those being in Greater China. And today we're going to be tackling one of the most common myths that I often hear about China, and that is the fact that there is no freedom in China today. Now, when we start discussing freedom, I think it's very important for people to realize that freedom is very subjective. Freedom can mean different things to different people. And to help illustrate my point, let's talk about the open container law in the United States of America. Now, currently in America, it is illegal to walk in a public space with an open container of alcohol. Now, of course, the great exemption to this rule would be the city of Las Vegas, but basically everywhere else in the United States, it is illegal to do this. Now, here's the interesting thing. In mainland China today, it is perfectly legal to walk around the streets of any city carrying an open bottle of alcohol. There is no law against that, and it is a unique freedom that the Chinese people do enjoy. However, not many people in China actually do this. Culturally, it's not a very big thing for Chinese people to walk around with alcohol. However, whenever I had American friends come and visit me in Shanghai, I would tell them that there is no open container law in China, and immediately you could see their eyes lit up. The first thing that they wanted to do was go down to the convenience stores, grab a couple of beers, and walk around the streets of Shanghai. Why? Well, because it's a unique freedom for Americans. They really felt as American tourists in China that this was a freedom that they just had to enjoy because they knew that they couldn't do that in their home country. So again, an open container law for Americans probably would be a very, very big thing. For the Chinese, not so much. So different freedoms mean different things to different people. Now let's apply this same logic to some of the more important principles of freedom. Now, one of the first arguments that people like to make when talking about freedom in China is the fact that the Chinese government controls the internet in mainland China. And it's true. Some of the world's most popular websites like Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all of these websites are currently banned in China today. However, here's the interesting thing. China has 1.4 billion people, and it has a very vibrant internet scene. There are hundreds and hundreds of millions of users. Many of them are active on the internet for hours at a time, and they have some of the most incredible social media apps. So although there is no Facebook in China, there is WeChat, which is just as good, if not better. There's no Twitter, but there's Weibo. There's no YouTube, but there's Youku. So whatever Western equivalent that you want, China already has that. It's already existing in the Chinese internet system. Now, a lot of people would follow it up and say, well, the Chinese government is controlling what news the Chinese people can see. They don't want anybody to learn what's actually going on in the outside world. Now, in the year 2000, Chinese nationals made over 10 million overseas trips. However, in 2018, that number rose to 149 million. This 18-year period represents an increase of 1,300%. Now, the point of me showing you this graph is the fact that the Chinese are now the #1 tourist in the world. Chinese have a great sense of what's going on in the world because, one, they're traveling abroad. They're traveling to all corners of the globe. They're learning about different cultures and societies. And the reality is when they learn about all these cultures and societies, they enjoy their time and then they go back to China because China's their home. They enjoy their life in China. Even if they immigrate, they still come back to China. They still maintain their homes and things in China. Now, a lot of Americans like to own firearms. In fact, there's actually more guns in America than people itself. And that is one of the things that many Americans have said to me. Well, what about safety in China? In China, the government controls the fact that there's no people that are allowed to own firearms in China. And it's true. Now, from my perspective, I'm an American that I don't really value the freedom of owning a gun. It's not a huge priority to me. I've never owned a gun. I don't like guns to begin with. So it's not a huge value, even though I'm an American. Again, this is where freedom becomes very subjective. It's not a huge value to me. I actually prefer living in a country like China because guess what? In China, there's no guns. So when there's no guns, there's no gun crime. There's no homicides. There's no school shootings. There's no dangers of me walking out in the middle of the night into a bad neighborhood and getting shot or killed. None of these exist for when I live in China. And that's a great freedom that I enjoy. So again, this is very subjective. So a lot of people in America would say, well, you must have guns because you need to control yourself against a terrible government. What happens if the government goes bad? You must protect yourself. Now, we actually saw this last month when many protesters rushed the Michigan courthouse and they stood outside with their massive guns and they said, look, this is America. This is why we need to have guns, because we need to protect ourselves against the government. That is what people in America value as freedom. However, in China, the Chinese people, they don't think that is freedom. They have faith in their government. They have faith in the safety of the government and the safe environment that provides them. China is one of the most safest countries in the world. And the reality is that we simply don't need guns in China in order to feel safe. That is just a cultural difference. Now, the third and final issue that many people like to talk about is the fact that the Chinese people, they do not get to vote for the current president of China. That is not a freedom that is allowed to them. And as an American, that's a huge freedom. That is a very, very big thing for Americans. Obviously, we are very proud of the fact that we get to elect our leader. And again, I think this is a very subjective thing. Now, when I was living in Hong Kong in 2016, I have to be honest with you, it was a great amount of stress on me as an American because everybody knew that I was American. The first question that they wanted to ask me was, what do you think about the election? Trump or Hillary? Trump or Hillary? I had to endure this for about 8 months as we got, closer and closer to the election day. And when finally the 2016 presidential election came to a close, it was actually a great relief for me because I finally didn't have to answer all these questions about having to vote. It honestly was a great stress in my life. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't, appreciate the fact that I get a chance to vote as an American. I am an American. It is my vote, and I'm very happy to have that. However, I can understand when people in China are saying, you know what? It's a lot of responsibility to vote for your leader of the country. There's probably a lot of people out there that don't really understand the ins and outs of the government, how it works. There's probably a lot of voters out there that aren't really educated to make a properly educated decision in their vote. This seems like a really big responsibility. I'm glad that somebody else, with more experience can make that decision for me. Now, again, this sounds very strange for Westerners because it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, I must have the chance to vote. That's great. But what we can't do is we cannot apply these Western values in a Chinese system. And that is where a lot of the errors that we have, these cultural differences and this big fight between China and the United States is currently happening right now. Now, just this past week, I had a very interesting conversation with somebody on Twitter who was very much against the Chinese Communist Party. And he told me this. He said, Cyrus, unless democracy and the right to vote is given to every single Chinese citizen, we will never know what the true wants and desires of the citizens of China are. Now, my reply to him was this. I said, well, it's very simple. If you actually talk to many Chinese people, the vast majority of them will say that they have faith in their government. They have faith in their government because of what has happened the last 30 years. In the last 30 years, China's government has alleviated 80% of the world's poverty within their own country. Okay, 80% of the world's poverty alleviation around the world has occurred directly in China. Over 700 million people have been lifted from poverty into the middle class. Basically, they're saying, well, look at China. Look at our progress the last 30 years. It's going really good. I have no reason to believe that the future will not continue to go good. So why do we want to change? Now again, I told this to this man on Twitter, and he simply replied, yes, but we must give the Chinese freedom. They don't have any freedom to choose. But it's really interesting. It's a catch-22. Chinese people are literally telling us that they enjoy their government, that they enjoy being Chinese, they enjoy their country, they like everything the way it is. However, we're not listening to them, and we want to install democracy in their country to give them freedom. Do you see what I'm saying? It's very ironic because they're experiencing freedom right now. The freedom that they like and that they want is they just want their country to be left alone. That's one of the biggest desires of Chinese people. And this is what you're seeing, these tensions with the United States and China. United States is saying we must bring democracy to every citizen in China. The vast majority are saying we don't want democracy. We just want our own country. And that's fine that you have democracy. We're not telling you that you need to change your way. We're just saying don't come to China and try to change our way. Let's just try to get along together. Now, in closing, I want to close with this one tweet that I sent out a couple weeks ago. It received a lot of great feedback, and it simply said, China will never be America. America will never be China. Let's just learn that there are going to be differences, and let's stop trying to put a square peg into a round hole. It's just not going to work. So this is why I want people to understand when we're talking about freedom, the Chinese people have a tremendous amount of freedom. They can travel the world, they can buy real estate abroad, they can immigrate to other countries, they can send their kids abroad, they can stay domestically, they can open up businesses, they can invest in the stock market. Chinese people can do so many different things. It is a very, very free country, if you look at it in the terms from the eyes of a Chinese person, and if you look at it from the Chinese cultural perspective. Now, again, it might be completely different than what we're used to in the West, but that is the world that we live in. So let's stop thinking that there's only one form of government that's going to exist. There can be many forms of government. Just like religion, there can be many different types that can exist. We can all learn to work together. Let's keep democracy in America because that's what made our country great. And you know what? China is embracing their form of government because they've been able to prove to the world over the last 30 years, they've achieved a tremendous amount of success. So everyone, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you're interested in learning more about China, every week we're putting out new videos that is basically giving an insight into China and its relationship with the world today. My name is Cyrus. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in next week's video.